The United States and Venezuela sit on the brink of war. Tensions between the two nations have risen dramatically in recent days, with both nations flexing their military muscles on more than one occasion. Those tensions are now reaching an explosive point, and it will only take a single spark to set this whole situation ablaze. It's a situation that kicked off back in late August, when US President Donald Trump ordered a sizable flotilla of Navy vessels to the South Caribbean Sea, just off the coast of Venezuela, as part of a coordinated campaign to combat drug cartels in the region. The flotilla included no less than 8 warships, some of which boast amphibious assault capacities, along with world-leading F-35 fighter jets and approximately 4,500 personnel. That makes it one of the largest displays of strength in the Caribbean by the US in decades. On September 2nd, the US took further action. It carried out a precision airstrike on a drug smuggling vessel that was reportedly linked to the Tren de Aragua cartel. 11 people on board were killed, and the vessel was destroyed. President Trump confirmed this in a social media post at the time, which also included video footage of the attack taking place. From there, tensions continued to rise. US officials, like Secretary of State Marco Rubio, refused to rule out further strikes and even action on Venezuelan soil, with Rubio stating,
"Well, this is a counter-drug operation. We're going to take on drug cartels wherever they are and wherever they're operating against the interests of the United States."
The US has also repeatedly called out the leader of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, for conspiring with cartels, with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stating,
"The Maduro regime is not the legitimate government of Venezuela. It is a narco-terror cartel. In Maduro, it is the view of this administration, is not a legitimate president. He is a fugitive head of this cartel who has been indicted in the United States for trafficking drugs into the country."
Meanwhile, in Venezuela, Maduro has argued that the US is using its cartel campaign as a cover to carry out a forceful regime change. The government of the United States should abandon its plan of violent regime change in Venezuela and in all of Latin America, and respect sovereignty, the right to peace, to independence. The Venezuelan leader, who entered his third term as president after a highly contested and controversial 2024 election, also announced a mobilization of the Venezuelan militia. And despite facing up against the world's biggest and strongest military force, Venezuela has not backed down from flaunting its own military strength whenever possible. On September 4, just a couple of days after the US took out the vessel in the South Caribbean, a pair of Venezuelan F-16 fighter jets, supplied by the US many years ago, flew over one of the US warships in the area. It was a move seen by many in Washington as a provocation, and President Trump stated that any further acts of that kind would result in a military response, stating in no uncertain terms,
"If they do put us in a dangerous position, they'll be shut down."
Since then, the situation has spiraled quite dramatically, to the point where many analysts now believe war is almost an inevitability. The first major development came on September 15, when Trump announced that a second kinetic strike had taken place against drug traffickers in the South Caribbean Sea. This morning, on my orders, US military forces conducted a second kinetic strike against positively identified, extraordinarily violent drug trafficking cartels and narco-terrorists in the Southcom area of responsibility. The strike occurred while these confirmed narco-terrorists from Venezuela were in international waters transporting illegal narcotics, a deadly weapon poisoning Americans, headed to the US. These extremely violent drug trafficking cartels pose a threat to US national security, foreign policy, and vital US interests. The strike resulted in 3 male terrorists killed in action. No US forces were harmed in this strike. Be warned. If you're transporting drugs that can kill Americans, we're hunting you. The illicit activities by these cartels have wrought devastating consequences on American communities for decades, killing millions of American citizens. No longer. In a follow-up interview, Trump actually stated that 3 boats had been taken out in total, though no details have since been shared about the third. The president told reporters on the White House lawn.
"We knocked off actually 3 boats, not 2, but you saw 2.
Maduro, in response, said that relations between Venezuela and the US had been destroyed by their bomb threats. "We have moved from a period of battered relations to a completely broken one." Venezuelan Foreign Minister Iván Gil also accused US forces of illegally and hostilely boarding an innocent fishing vessel. A statement from Venezuela's foreign ministry said the US was looking for an incident to justify escalating war in the Caribbean with the aim of regime change. Maduro has also made repeated proclamations against any American intervention on Venezuelan soil, stating, "No empire will touch the sacred soil of Venezuela." Both sides have since edged even closer to confrontation after carrying out public military exercises in close proximity to one another. On September 17, Venezuela announced that it started 3 days of military exercises on the Caribbean island of La Orchila in response to rising US activity in the area. The country's armed forces announced that 12 ships will be involved in these exercises, along with 22 aircraft and 20 small boats from Venezuela's special naval militia. Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez confirmed that other pieces of military equipment will also be in operations, including various kinds of drones. The minister said, "There will be air defense deployments with armed drones, surveillance drones, submarine drones. We're going to implement electronic warfare actions." Padrino also cited the threatening, vulgar voice of the US as one of the key reasons behind this exercise, which has been dubbed Sovereign Caribbean. Images and video footage have since appeared on Venezuelan public TV stations, revealing Russian-made artillery systems along with amphibious vessels and warships deployed off the coast of La Orchila, which is also home to a Venezuelan military base. The island, which measures up to some 43 square kilometers or 176 square miles, is about 110 miles from the Venezuelan mainland. It's also very close to the area where the US intercepted the aforementioned fishing boat. While this may be a simple coincidence, some analysts say that the selection of this area for Venezuela's military exercises is an intentional play by Caracas to perhaps pressure or intimidate America's forces. On top of this, Maduro and his government officials have also made multiple additional declarations about his country's readiness for conflict. The president said, "We're ready for an armed fight if it's necessary. Along all the Venezuelan coasts, from the border with Colombia to the east of the country, from north to south and east to west, we have a full preparation of official troops." Maduro also said that military and militia members would be deployed to no fewer than 284 battlefront locations up and down the country, with an estimated 25,000 troops mobilized at the border. There are also continuous calls for Venezuelan citizens who are willing and able to defend their homeland to enlist in the military reserve, with Defense Minister Padrino stating, "We are raising our operational readiness facing the Caribbean. We must elevate our operational readiness for a scenario of armed conflict at sea." The South American nation has also recently flaunted its Russian-made Sukhoi Su-30 fighter jets. The Venezuelan Air Force published a video on Instagram showing these aircraft both on the ground and in the air, with anti-ship missiles seen hanging from the wings. The post caption noted that the jets were part of Venezuela's 13th Lions Fighter Air Group and equipped with Russian-made Kh-31 Krypton air-to-surface anti-ship missiles. According to official reports from the Center for Analysis of Strategies and Technologies, Venezuela purchased an unknown quantity of Kh-31 missiles from Russia back in the late 2000s. Reports also state that Venezuela is believed to have both anti-ship and anti-radar variants of the Kh-31s and operates a grand total of 21 Su-30 Mk2 fighter jets. However, not all of them may be fully operational and in service, given the fact that Venezuela is in the midst of a major economic crisis and does not likely have the funds necessary to maintain such advanced jets, which are said to cost anywhere from $30 to $50 million each. Indeed, a report from the Venezuelan NGO Control Ciudadano suggested that there have been problems of system obsolescence, maintenance, and lack of spare parts for aircraft like the Su-30, so Caracas may not have too many of these jets to call on should the need arise. That doesn't change the fact that the Su-30s are widely considered by military experts to be strong and versatile fighters with a lot of advantages. They no longer sit at the very peak of fighter jet technology and have been surpassed by other Russian models like the Su-57 and other jets from around the world, like America's F-35 Lightning II and F-22 Raptor. But they're no pushovers. Developed back in the days of the Soviet Union during the 1980s, these twin-engine two-seat aircraft are multi-role fighters suitable for a range of missions in all weather conditions. They're capable of reaching peak speeds of Mach 2 or twice the speed of sound, which works out at more than 1,500 miles per hour, and have a range of 1,900 miles or 3,000 kilometers at high altitude. They can be equipped with a range of missiles and other armaments, including the aforementioned KH-31s, as well as air-to-surface missiles, air-to-air missiles, anti-radiation missiles, and bombs, plus a 30mm GSH-31 autocannon with 150 rounds. Su-30s also come fitted with radar systems to detect incoming enemy missiles or aircraft in their surroundings, plus electro-optical targeting systems to lock onto their targets and other advanced avionics systems too. However, despite all of those impressive tech specs, and despite Maduro's government claims of assembling a massive militia and showing off its training exercises right under the US Navy's noses, the simple fact of the matter is that America has assembled a very formidable force of its own in the South Caribbean Sea. That force includes the USS Iwo Jima Wasp-class amphibious assault ship, the USS Fort Lauderdale, and the USS San Antonio amphibious transport docks, the USS Lake Erie guided missile cruiser, the USS Gravely, and the USS Jason Dunham destroyers, the USS Minneapolis St. Paul littoral combat ship, a nuclear-powered attack submarine, at least 10 F-35 fighter jets, and a Boeing P-8 Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft, all manned by several thousand Marines and sailors. While Venezuela is showing off decades-old Soviet jets, the US is arriving with best-in-class military equipment, including world-leading fighter aircraft and the kinds of warships that have enough firepower to wipe entire cities off the map, plus some of the most highly trained personnel on the planet. And America's forces, just like Venezuela's, have also been carrying out their own training exercises in recent days. This was announced on social media accounts belonging to the US Southern Command, which oversees all US military activities in Latin America and the Caribbean region. On September 17, Southern Command shared a video which began with the text, "The 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit SOC conducted amphibious landing rehearsals in Puerto Rico during the first weeks of September in support of Southcom priorities." The video then went on to show multiple clips of Marines, helicopters, artillery, rifles, firing ranges, amphibious landing craft, armoured vehicles, and more. But arguably, the most significant element of the clip was its audio, which consisted of nothing more than a ticking sound like a clock or timer counting down to something big. This was followed shortly after by another post, which showed a pair of F-35 fighter jets on the ground alongside the caption, "A look at US military forces in the #Southcom area of responsibility, ensuring global reach and sharpening readiness. Southcom is present and engaged in the Caribbean, Central and South America, leading to improved unity, security and stability." The Department of War posted a similar image on X, along with another caption that's clearly designed to send ripples of fear and concern among the Venezuelan leadership. F-35B Lightning II jets for Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 225 are now in Puerto Rico. They're ready to take on cartels whose illicit activities have wrought devastating consequences on Americans for decades. America's warfighters are the best in the world, and our enemies know it. Evidently, there's a lot of posturing and power projection happening here, from both sides. On the one hand, Venezuela is showing off some of the better equipment at its disposal and making bold claims of troop deployments far and wide across its nation. Its officials are also attempting to push the narrative that the US is attempting a regime change, with some even making conspiratorial claims, suggesting that the boats blown up by American forces weren't even carrying any drugs. On September 17, for instance, Venezuela's Interior Minister, Diosdado Cabello, said, "One doesn't know, because they say it carried drugs, but who saw the drugs?" Cabello also said that Venezuela is already doing great work in cracking down on cartels and drug traffickers, allegedly seizing more than 60 tons of drugs so far this year. It's the largest amount that's been seized since 2010. It's worth noting, however, that Cabello, like Maduro, is under US sanctions, and that any official statements from the Venezuelan government have to be taken with a large grain of salt, given its alleged links with the cartels. But one thing is clear, The people in charge of the country are laying the groundwork so that if America does take further action and the Maduro government falls, they can say it was all part of some big scheme from the US. Venezuela has also been posturing in other ways, with Maduro publicly speaking about his strong relationship with China, most likely in the hope that the Asian nation will come to his country's aid if the US take things further. And while it's true that Beijing sees Caracas as an important trade partner, and the Chinese Foreign Ministry has spoken out against American actions in the area, analysts have played down the possibility of any sort of military intervention from China to defend or reinforce Venezuela. The US, meanwhile, has a much stronger military force to show off. It's demonstrated its precision strike capabilities with attacks on at least 2 and possibly 3 vessels so far, and it's amassed a sizable force that would be more than capable of dealing serious damage not just to Venezuela's cartels, but to the Maduro government too, especially if it continues to stand in America's way or display further signs of aggression. As for what happens next, several possibilities exist. One of those would be American boots on the ground in Venezuela. The landing vessels are there, and so are the troops, and it would only take a single order for the US Navy force to move closer to the coast and deploy hundreds or thousands of Marines on Venezuelan soil. This would most likely be the worst case scenario for Maduro, and it's probably why he's been so insistent in his statements about keeping the American empire, as he calls it, out of his country. Another possibility would be US forces carrying out targeted raids on known cartel HQs, smuggling routes, and other important locations in order to possibly kill or capture leading cartel members. Alternatively, precision strikes could be launched against known cartel facilities, as it's highly likely at this stage that American intelligence services have already gathered the necessary data to know at least some of the locations these cartels operate from. Taking out the boats as they're on the way north towards American soil is one thing, but taking out the cartel's facilities in Venezuela could be a more effective way of getting at the root of the problem. This could be done with the likes of Tomahawk land attack missiles fired from US Navy warships. With a range of more than 1,000 miles, Tomahawks would have no trouble reaching and taking out land-based targets in the blink of an eye. Alternatively, the US may simply choose to persist with its existing strategy of guarding the South Caribbean Sea and taking out any additional drug smuggling vessels it spots in the area. With each successive attack, the smugglers would be weakened and the cartels would be increasingly wary about attempting any further crossings. They may have to seek out alternative routes, losing time, money and resources, and perhaps even turning against the government in the process, which could ultimately lead to the toppling of Maduro's regime and a complete shift in the face of Venezuelan politics and international relations. The issue, however, is that Maduro may not be willing to sit around and see what the US decides to do next. Fearing for his future, he could decide to push a little bit further, making a move that the US may see as a provocation or even a threat. Continuing to fly jets over American warships, for example, and talking about underwater drones, electronic warfare exercises, and militia members lining up along the coastlines and borders will not lead to any sort of de-escalation. In fact, it could take this entire situation to a much more serious level, all the way to some sort of full-scale conflict between Venezuela and the US. And that's one fight that Venezuela simply will not win. Now, to learn more about how things reached this point, check out some of our recent videos detailing the situation so far, looking at how and why the US military originally sent ships into the South Caribbean Sea, and how Venezuela has responded by preparing for war. And finally, make sure to subscribe to our channel too, so you can stay informed and be among the first to find out what happens next both in Venezuela and other important locations all over the globe.